and through South America and Africa, you'll ask yourself, how long will these people continue with a lack of material things when they watch television and see the good life that all the others are living? I don't think we can go on indefinitely assuming that people will be happy with a less material society. Now, I don't quite see us giving up what we have either. I don't know how this is all going to work out. But I don't think we can go on assuming that the people in the have-not nations are going to be content.
I had a couple questions.
Donald McDonald, executive editor of the Center magazine.
One was, how much freedom and how much flexibility do you think a president would have, any president, Mr. Nixon or his successor, if he really wanted to turn the arms race around and do something, say, for peace and work on the domestic issues? How much flexibility does he have vis-a-vis the military?
I must say that I was terribly disappointed in my personal experience with how little power the president has. Mr. Kennedy, whom I just admired tremendously, was in a state of frustrations a great deal of the time, because you got the people on the Hill and they've got the money, and you got the people over in state who've got to do a week's study of a paper before it comes out, and he's got to make a decision. And it was very difficult. Now, I think a strong enough president can get the Pentagon under control without any doubt, and President Kennedy tried to by bringing McNamara in, and McNamara tried very, very hard to. And the problem with the Pentagon is a very, very real one. And I've written about this, and the problem still exists, and it is this. You have three principal services. The Marine Corps may sit in the Joint Chiefs and vote when a matter of concern to the Marines comes up. But normally they'll vote with the Chief of Naval Operations. And you have three services really voting. Now, if $1 billion become available, here we are, the three of us. Chief of Naval Operations, Chief of Staff of the Army, Chief of Staff of the Air Force. $1 billion come up. Chief of Naval Operations says, well, I want a new aircraft carrier, and Air Force says, I want a new bomber. And the Army sits in between, can't think of quite what it wants because it doesn't have anything exotic like that to put in inventory. So they say, all right, we'll ask for the carrier this fiscal year, and you'll support me, and next fiscal year I'll support you for the B-1. And so this is the way the programs are formulated. Believe me, this is absolute gospel truth. This is how it works out. And then you see, unfortunately, the poor Secretary of Defense is on top of this pile, and the only pressure or power play he can bring on the chiefs is to threaten to take over some of the decision-making if they don't behave and be more reasonable in what they do. And the Joint Chiefs are very worried about this, and they're constantly saying, well, we got to decide now. We don't want the Secretary of Defense having to decide for us. Now, McNamara did decide for them on a number of situations. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. What we've needed, and I've said so, and I got in hot water for doing it, indeed part of my leaving the service was over this issue. The Secretary of Defense, whoever he is, needs the best advice he can get. And he needs a staff of his own to give him that advice. And we do not need a Joint Chiefs of Staff, because the Joint Chiefs of Staff's log roll to the disadvantage of the country. Now, I recommended that we do waive the Joint Chiefs because they wear two hats. That's the problem. This gentleman on my left is not only Chief of Staff of the Air Force, but he's a member of the Joint Chiefs. Now, he's got to lead the Air Force, and he's got to tell those people in the Air Force they have the best service, the best force in the world, the best equipment, the best weapons, and they want something, he's got to fight for it. So he can't represent the national interest at the same time. So I recommend that we do waive the Joint Chiefs, and when they leave their service, have them as an elder body of advisors to the Secretary of Defense with no service responsibilities. In the meantime, there be no such thing as a Joint Chiefs, but a staff reporting right to the Secretary of Defense. And that staff, in turn, would look at all propositions and all recommendations and all proposals and the budget, and it would be a true DOD budget, not a Joint Chiefs budget. I think the Secretary of Defense needs a good staff. He should make his own decisions, and the services should do what he says. And the Joint Chiefs should be done away with, and when they retire from being chief, be an advisor to the Secretary of Defense as an elder statesman.
Should Congress have a staff also so that it can make intelligent and informed decisions on budget, military appropriations? Should they have a research staff?
Well, they've got a bit of a staff. The Armed Forces Committee of the House and of the Senate both have staffs of their own. And then they have investigatory bodies that they send out into the field to find out what's going on, and they uncover the post-exchange scandals and all this and that. But I was very much interested this year for the first time that Mr. Stennis is very troubled about defense spending. It shakes you when you see how that money is spent over there. And when I say that we could go from 76 billion down to 60 with no trouble at all, I mean this. And I've said this publicly. I've said it in national television. I've said it in the Pentagon. And they know what the problems are, but we're far from solving them. Maybe the president we elect in 72 could pick a very strong Secretary of Defense and could do away with the Joint Chiefs. I remember sitting in the Pentagon after the satellite went up. When our Sputnik 1 went up, we knew Sputnik 1 was going to go up within a week. We predicted it that accurately. But the Joint Chiefs kept checkmating each other and wouldn't put any money in satellites. To me, it was a profoundly disturbing thing, because we shouldn't have gotten ourselves into a difficulty like that, and the Joint Chiefs were responsible for it. I went over to the Hill the next day and recommended we do away with the Joint Chiefs. And President Eisenhower sent a word right back to the Pentagon. Nobody over there will talk about doing away with the Joint Chiefs anymore. So that was the parting of the ways. But anyway, this is a very serious problem, and substantive and real changes have got to be made in the organization of the Pentagon and in the National Defense Act. When we're going to be ready for that, I don't know. Maybe a president in 72 could propose it, and it's very, very necessary.
General Gavin, I was wondering how you would interpret the Peking visit.
The speaker is George micc-tt, Director of the Southeast Asia Program at Cornell University and now a visiting center fellow.
Whether you wouldn't see that as an anti-Russian move on the part of the administration, or at least see it within the context of the Soviet-American relationship.
I was very uncomfortable about the Peking visit before it took place. I had lived in the Philippine Islands for a couple of years, and I've been all over Asia, except on the mainland. And there's a great deal involved in face. They see us in a certain way, and certainly they saw the president coming as a supplicant from a barbarian nation, as supplicants have been coming for many years, many generations, and he exposed himself to some extent. And yet I thought it came off very, very well. And I would attribute the fact that it did to their preoccupation with the Soviet confrontation. Now, I've talked to the Russians about the China problem, and it's a very troublesome one. But from the Russians' point of view, Peking is right there. Just through Mongolia, and you got it, and then you got Manchuria, and her war-making capacity is gone. And the Chinese know this. They feel they're very, very vulnerable. And they know the Soviets are building up even now airfields, depots, warehouses, highways, and so on in preparation for what they consider to be an inevitable conflict. This is why the Chinese are building air raid shelters now. It may seem unreal to us, but it isn't to the Russians, nor is it to the Chinese. The one thing that troubled the Russians about the visit was we might play games, and this is what they said. Now, don't play games with us over this, but yet we're playing games all right, and they're playing games too. I think that the Chinese were very kind to Mr. Nixon and very reasonable and behaved well, because they do want our friendship. They want our friendship in the event of a conflict with the Soviet Union particularly. This is very important to them. The problems they have and the internal problems in their society are so enormous, so massive. They've got all they can do to take care of themselves for the next few decades anyway. And the Russians caused them trouble. They want us to be at least friendly to them, and I think this is why they treated Mr. Nixon as they did. I think it came off very, very well.
You have been listening to a discussion of factors that bear on national and international strength and security. The speaker was General James Gavin. Participating in the discussion were Center staff members Harry S. Ashmore, John Cogley, Robert Rosen, Sidney Holt, Donald MacDonald, and George micc-tt. This program originated at the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara.